The war in the Middle East has paused for now, and at this very juncture, everyone is eager to know who actually won. Is it US, Israel or Iran? Well, it won't be wrong to say that both sides scored important gains and suffered serious setbacks, and the final judgment will depend on what happens in the coming months and years. So today in this edition of From the News Desk, we will explain in the simplest of terms what Israel achieved, what Iran achieved, and what still remains unclear. Today we are keeping US out of this comparison and treating it as an ally to the Israeli campaign. So sit back and watch this video till the end to know the balance sheet of the Middle East war. Now, by classic military matrix, Israel emerges from this round with some of the most dramatic battlefield achievements it has ever recorded against the Islamic Republic. At the top of that list is the systematic pounding of Iran's ballistic missile program. Together with US, Israel neutralized an estimate majority of Iran's missilers, slashed missile fire capability by roughly 90%, destroyed hundreds of missiles, and heavily damaged production facilities and key supply chains. In fact, Israeli assessments now suggest that Iran may have only several hundred to around 1,000 missiles left that can actually reach Israel, compared with a pre-war stockpile of roughly 2,500 and even higher totals in the mid-2025, meaning it could take years for Tehran to rebuild its arsenal. Israel also claimed the most symbolic of kills, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and many senior military leaders at the core of Iran's decision-making apparatus. Now, before this very war, Khamenei's rejection of the June 2025 conflict's outcomes and his willingness to press on with nuclear and missile programs convinced Jerusalem that as long as he remained in power, Iran's strategic threat would only grow with time. Removing him and top commanders is seen in Israel as a prerequisite for any manageable regional order and as a direct blow to the regime's capacity and will to launch large-scale missile retaliation. Now, on the ground and in the air, the US-Israeli campaign inflicted deep structural damage on Iran's wider military machine. Beyond missiles, extensive strikes degraded Tehran's ability to produce and deploy drones, naval vessels, and other aerial, land, and maritime assets, knocking out critical platforms and parts of the supply network that fed them. Now, the expectation in the Israeli circles is that every rial poured into rebuilding these capabilities will be one less available for arming anti-Israel proxies in the region. Now, at home, Israel can also point to a decisive win in limiting the human and structural toll on its civilians. As per certain estimates, Iran launched more than 500 missiles towards Israel, and around 90% were intercepted by multi-layered air defense shield. Though the damage was there, but it was sustainably lower than the worst-case projections, allowing Israeli officials to argue that the home front weathered a strategic barrage without collapsing. Now let's talk about Iran. Yet if Israel holds the edge on hard military matrix, Iran can claim a series of political, economic, and psychological victories that prevent this war from being a clear Israeli knockout. Now, foremost among them is survival. Despite assassination attempts that eliminated Khamenei and many senior officers, the new leadership in Tehran succeeded in stabilizing the regime and outlasting Israel and the US in political terms. And in Iranian eyes, simply preventing external regime change and riding out of the storm counts as a strategic win and a blow to Western efforts to reshape the Islamic Republic in political terms. Iran also proved that it can hold the global economy hostage by effectively closing the Strait of Hormuz with a mix of relative cheap tools like sea mines, drones, and cruise missiles. It demonstrated an ability to disrupt world energy supplies and spike gas prices, including in the United States. In fact, American attempts leveraging air power failed to fully reopen the vital waterway, and Washington ultimately faced pressure from rising domestic fuel costs, a factor that helped push all sides towards a ceasefire before Iran had made any substantial concessions. Well, regionally, Tehran showcased its capacity to spread chaos far beyond Israel's border, inflicting damage in and around a dozen countries using missiles and drones. That reach and the psychological impact of hitting multiple states bolsters Iran's deterrence narrative despite the material losses it suffered. Inside Israel, Iran's strikes still produce real pain. As per reports, at least 40 Israelis were killed, nearly 7,500 were hospitalized, and approximately 2,800 properties have been damaged, with roughly a quarter of those homes expected to be inhospitable for extended periods. Now, not only residential area but major industrial sites in the Haifa area and south were also hit, and Iran's shift to lighter warheads and dense cluster munitions increased the numbers of impact points in a way Israel was not prepared for. Politically, Iran secured a ceasefire without binding itself to Israeli-American demands on its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Well, we can say, as of now. Now, the biggest open question is what happens to the Iranian regime. For now, it seems to have survived in some form or another, but if it collapses within the next 6 to 12 months, many in Israel will see this war as a major success. But if the regime survives for even around 3 years, people will argue that the war did not achieve its main goal. Now, another unclear issue is Iran's missile power in the long term. Israel has badly damaged Iran's missile factories, stockpiles, and supply chains, pushing the most serious threat back by years as per Israeli claims. But on the flip side, Iran has showcased its still hold firing capacity and has some launchers left. So the real test will be whether Tehran rebuilds its arsenal or changes its strategy. Now comes the nuclear question, which is even more uncertain. Israel claims they have already degraded Iran's nuclear program by about 2 years in the June 2025 conflict. But this war did not solve the key problem, like the large amount of 60% enriched uranium stored in hardened sites. And as per certain reports, Israel and the US decided not to launch a risky operation to seize or destroy this uranium. So removing it now seems possibly only through a deal. Even at sea, the outcome is mixed. Israel and the US claim they destroyed more than 150 Iranian naval vessels, which is a serious loss for Iran's navy. But the Strait of Hormuz is still at the mercy of Iran because they use cheap tools like mines and drones, so it is not clear if sinking all of those ships really gave Israel and US the leverage they wanted. For now, the war's balance sheet is very clear. Israeli military superiority, clear Iranian resilience and economic leverage, and a cluster of unresolved strategic questions whose answer will ultimately determine who truly won or whether both sides merely traded different kinds of victories.